Really presenting in the meeting to the court. All the other elements, looking for images for the deck and approving the minutes, they may feel essential, but they're customary, not mandatory to what needs to be done. And it's in those places that we often make a lot of trouble, like a lot of extra work for ourselves. So the final step is to find a low-stakes situation. Maybe you practice with a team meeting, or maybe it's a minor client meeting that isn't covering important ground, and it's with a safe, trusted client. And you try out a new way of doing things. The truth is, maybe you don't even need a deck after all. It becomes bloated and unwieldy and untenable because you can't focus on all those things at once. You're pulled in too many directions. Conversely, we should be asking ourselves, what can we cut out? What can we pare down? And here are a few basis. What is most critical and what is most time sensitive? Fans of the leadership books out there might be familiar with this. It's known as the Eisenhower Matrix. This President Eisenhower popularized it. Stephen Covey talked about it as well. In other words, what's urgent and what's important? Those are the things your eyes on. Another important question you can ask yourself is what can only be done for you and what can be delegated? It might feel in the moment like everything has to be done by you. And of course, it's true, maybe other people can't necessarily do it as well as you can. But the truth is, in many instances, people can do things pretty well if you train them. It takes more time up front, and that can be a hassle. But if you actually work to systematize your processes, if you write down what you're doing and take time to coach someone, eventually you can actually free up quite a bit of time by that process. So think carefully about what you realistically can delegate to others. And finally, it's useful to ask yourself a question that might seem a little bit counterintuitive. Where can you make cuts and actually improve results? There's a well-known study by Columbia psychologist Sheena Iyengar about jam. She and some colleagues actually set up a booth at a grocery store. And in the first experiment, they had 6 jams for customers to sample. And in the second one, they had 24 jams. Now, customers really liked tasting all the jams. It was very exciting for them when they had 24 options. But the truth was, they ended up buying less. And the reason is that when we give consumers, or anyone for that matter, too many options, it leads to paralysis. It's confusing. They feel like, oh, I'll never have time to evaluate the merits of all of these things, and so they just stop, they freeze, and they do nothing. We want to make things simple. We want to make it simple for our customers to buy. We want to make it simple for our colleagues and people around us to work with us. So think through, are there areas of your business or your processes, how you do things, that have gotten too complicated, too many steps, and can you slice down and pare back, and in the process actually improve your results? By asking yourself this critical question, what can you cut out? You may, in fact, actually be able to do things better, and that is an incredible strategic move. One of the places that strategic thinking can be really useful is in understanding long-term developments and long-term trends. Now, it's also a place we have to be careful because you have to learn to tell the difference between a legitimate trend and a passive fad. But also, there can be a lot of hype up front, even for legitimately important developments. People will often say, this changes everything, everything is different, and eventually everything might be different. But usually it takes time for the full scope of changes to unfold. And so we have to understand the pacing of things. So here are a few things that you can keep in mind. The first is that when it comes to actually following these trends and understanding them, that is not your boss's job or your company's job for you. Of course, they need to keep on top of it for themselves. But the point is, you need to be responsible for that. You cannot just sit back and be spoon-fed this information or assume that something will come to you. You need to keep on top of it. And that means being aware of what your boss is thinking about and what he or she is following, reading the company's annual report or listening to the CEO's speeches to see what's on their horizon and what they care about. And also keeping up with a daily newspaper and with industry journals so that you know what's happening on the ground. That allows you to see around corners and make better strategic decisions. You also want to get conversant with the foundational principles in both your industry and in business in general. Think about what is unchanging. For instance, if all else is equal, customers will always want the lowest price option. Now, all things might not be equal. There might be different variables, but if everything is, low prices are a good move. Now, another thing to keep in mind is things like, what will customers always want? One example is food. People intrinsically need food. That's necessary. Now, the delivery mechanism might change, the type of food might change, but people will always need food in some form. Now, the final point is we've been focused on what is unchanging. Now let's think about what actually is changing. It could be consumer preferences. So think about hairstyles from the 60s to the 80s to today. They've changed a lot. That was something different. People always needed barbers and hairdressers, but the style was different. Begin to think about how your business can really conceptualize itself around concepts of what is forever. So the buggy whip manufacturers, back in the day when everybody rode horse-drawn carriages, if they had thought of themselves as transportation companies rather than as buggy whip manufacturers, of course, the competitive landscape was a lot different today, but instead they went out of business. So it's really important for all of us to be asking ourselves the question, what is changing and what, perhaps more importantly, is unchanging in our business? And how can we focus on that and move toward that? That will enable us to make better strategic decisions. These days, almost all of us feel busy, overextended. We have the same 24 hours in a day, 168 hours in a week. But the question that we need to be asking ourselves, when we're truly cultivating strategic thinking habits, is how can we get more leverage out of the time and effort that we do have? Think about literally a lever. It enables you to lift something far heavier than you would have been able to otherwise. And that's what leverage is in our business. It is the act of finding ways to make your time, your energy, and your effort count for more than its proportionate share. So how do we do it? Well, there's a couple things to keep in mind. One is you can ask yourself a very useful question, which is, how do I do something once and get that in front of even more people? So for instance, if I've written a blog post, that takes a certain amount of time, but if I say, oh, okay, I did that once, now I have to create a whole new thing, well, that's a lot of effort. Instead, something that I can do to get more value out of writing that blog post is I could say, well, is there an interesting quote in here that I could post on Twitter? Is there an interesting synopsis that I could write and post that on LinkedIn? When you do that, it helps leverage that work that you've already done in creating the content because it ensures that more people will see it and get exposed to it. Similarly, you might have a product that's done really well with one particular niche, but it's a big world out there. You can ask yourself, how can I take this product that's been so successful over here and expose it to this group of customers who might also be interested in it? You can also ask yourself another one that I like, which is, how can I do two things at once? Now, that might sound totally counterproductive. We've all heard the justified criticism of multitasking. No human being is able to really pay attention on a conference call when you type an email simultaneously, because that's using the same part of our brain. But the way to do this right is to actually use different parts of your brain, non-competitive activities. So for instance, you can very easily take a walk and call your parents at the same time to check in. Or you can be making dinner and listening to an audiobook and improving yourself in the process. Think about how you can do two useful and important things simultaneously. And that's a way that you can leverage more value out of your time. We all have the same constraints. We're all busy. But if we can get smarter about our use of leverage, we can be even more strategic. Just about everyone knows that strategic thinking is a good thing to do. And yet we don't do it. Sometimes it's excuses, sometimes it's erroneously thinking that you have to have magical or special conditions to be strategic, like a retreat in a cabin in the woods. But of course, that rarely happens. And so, therefore, strategic thinking rarely happens. And that is a shame because it is so important to make sure that we're focused on the right thing. How tragic to spend a huge amount of time and effort on something only to discover it was the wrong thing. The good news is that won't happen to you because you have invested the time now, up front, in making sure that you have cultivated the habits of strategic thinking. That it's not a nice to have, it's not something you do every 10 years when you get a sabbatical. It is a habit, it is a muscle you flex and something that you do every day. That is extraordinarily powerful in a rapidly changing world for you to have that North Star of knowing what your strategy is and being able to make that a habit in your life. I look forward to hearing more about your progress and would love to keep in touch. Please follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. And I'm excited for you and your strategic thinking journey.
That was supposed to be. Why did that very long?
How many decisions do you think you make each day? 500? 20?
This flipping board. These are flipping not good. There we go. The thing is, I flipping need this. See? see that? I think it's safe to say this. Yep, that's okay now. Bro, I got so sudden. By the way, if you're asking, I'm a boy, not a girl. Okay? Not a girl, you know. Okay? It's just my voice. It's just my voice, mom. Oh my god. What is it?
Boses mo yun? Bakit naman parang proud? Ayan. Ang boses niya. Makapins.
Let's just go to matchmaking. Advance to red versus blue. I don't know what to do. Oh my god, my mama! Wait a second. Okay, wait a second.